The battle is over. Rome has won. But for the soldiers walking across the field, the real work is just starting. Thousands of enemy bodies lie where they fell. And what the Romans do next isn't just checking for survivors. It's something planned, something with rules, and honestly, something a lot darker than most people realize. So what did Roman soldiers actually do to the bodies of their defeated enemies? And why did a civilization so obsessed with law and order also have such a brutal relationship with death on the battlefield? The first thing Roman soldiers did after a battle was strip the enemy bodies. Armor, weapons, jewelry, anything worth taking. This wasn't random looting, where everyone just grabs what they can. It was organized, almost businesslike. Officers kept track of what was taken. Commanders often sold off the captured gear afterward, and soldiers sometimes got a cut of the profits on top of their regular pay. Weapons mattered the most out of everything. Iron and bronze cost a lot of time and money to produce, so a battlefield full of enemy dead was basically a field full of free supplies. Captured shields, swords, and armor got melted down and reused, handed out to allied troops, or shipped back to Rome to be shown off as trophies of the win. Even the enemy's personal items weren't safe. Rings, coins, anything of value found on a body was taken. To the Romans, once a soldier was dead, everything he carried belonged to the victors now. For officers and top soldiers, there was an even bigger prize on the line, something called spolia opima, meaning rich spoils. This was the armor taken from an enemy leader, but there was a catch. It only counted if a Roman general killed that leader himself in direct hand-to-hand combat, not through his troops, not from a distance, face to face. Because of that rule, it was one of the rarest honors in all of Roman history. Historical records only mention it happening a handful of times across hundreds of years, since it needed two things to line up perfectly: a Roman commander brave or lucky enough to fight an enemy leader one-on-one, and skilled enough to actually win. When it did happen, the armor didn't just sit in someone's house as a keepsake. It got carried through the streets of Rome in a public procession and placed inside a temple, most famously, the Temple of Jupiter Feretrius. A single moment of battlefield violence turned into something almost sacred, living proof of Rome's power, blessed by the gods themselves. Roman armies also built actual trophies right on the battlefield, using the bodies and belongings of the men they just defeated. Soldiers would take a tree trunk or a wooden post and dress it up in captured enemy armor and weapons. This is called a tropaeum, and unlike the spoils that got taken back to Rome, this one stayed exactly where the battle happened. It worked as a rotting, standing reminder. Anyone who survived the fight, anyone from a nearby village, anyone traveling through later, they'd see it and know exactly what happened there, and exactly who won. And while Roman soldiers who died in battle usually got proper burials, following strict religious customs, defeated enemies often got none of that. Bodies were left out in the open on purpose, sometimes for days. The message was simple and brutal. Fight against Rome, and this is what happens to you. This wasn't cruelty just for the sake of it. It was a strategy, and a pretty calculated one at that. Rome couldn't physically station soldiers on every mile of its borders across 3 continents. So instead of relying only on force, it leaned heavily on fear and reputation. If word spread through a region that resisting Rome meant your body would be left to rot in a field for everyone to see, fewer people would even attempt to fight back in the first place. It was cheaper, in a way, to make people afraid than to fight every single battle by force. Leaving bodies unburied, parading captured armor through Rome, publicly humiliating the losing side. All of it was designed to make a Roman win feel total and final. Not just a battle won, but a message sent far beyond the battlefield itself. Historians have pointed out that Rome actively wanted these stories to travel, especially out to the edges of the empire, where rebellion was most likely to start. Here's the twist though. Rome didn't treat every enemy this way. Sometimes, a defeated enemy leader who fought with real skill and honor got a proper burial instead of public humiliation. This usually happened when Rome wanted to be seen as a fair, reasonable ruler, rather than just a brutal conqueror, especially in regions they planned to govern for the long term, instead of just destroy and move on from. So Rome picked and chose, carefully. Brutal humiliation for some, respect and honor for others. Nothing about it was random or emotional. Even something as final as what happened to a dead body was part of a much bigger, calculated plan. At the end of the day, this tells you a lot about what Rome actually valued. Not just land, not just military wins, but reputation. Being remembered as unstoppable mattered just as much as actually being unstoppable. What happened on the battlefield didn't end the moment the fighting stopped. What came after, the stripping, the trophies, the public displays, was just as calculated as the battle itself, maybe even more so. If this is the first video of mine you've watched, here's the thing. Most people only ever learn the clean version of Roman history in school. The battles, the emperors, the empire. But the real stuff, the stuff that actually explains how Rome managed to hold on to power for so long, that's what I'm digging into here every single week. So if this kind of history, the parts nobody actually teaches you, is something you want more of, hit subscribe right now. It genuinely helps me keep making these, and you won't miss the next one when it drops. Drop a comment and tell me which part of this surprised you the most. I read every single one.